So what we're changing from is currently, if you are a landlord of a periodic tenancy, you have to give you want to terminate that tenancy. The law is saying to you, you can only terminate under these permissible circumstances. And it gets a little bit awkward because I think in New Zealand, we have to recognize that we're a common law jurisdiction. We're a country that believes in the freedom to contract, and having that limitation placed on you and being told that you can only get out of a tenancy that's no longer working for you for whatever reason, and you can only get out for these specific reasons. It gets really awkward. It gets people's back up. It gets people very anxious about becoming a landlord, and it's sort of perceived risk of owning a rental property just goes sky high.
Welcome to Checks and Balances, brought to you by Partners Life. I'm Michael Vincent. This is James Blair. Today we've got Sarina Gibbon, head of the Auckland Property Investors Association, here to talk about the termination rules that every landlord needs to know.
We're back in your life. We're back in 2025. It's our first recording session for the year. We broke the fourth wall to disclose that. Michael, welcome back.
Thanks.
Sarina, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Cool.
So there are some changes happening in the property space this year.
Yes, lots of changes. So just before the Christmas break, Parliament passed the Residential Tenancy Amendments Act. So many changes in there, but I think the big takeaway that landlords should take with them and property managers is that there are some new termination rules to do with tenancy. So from the 30th of January onwards, periodic tenancy landlords can terminate with a 90-day no-fault termination notice. No fault simply means you're not required to state a reason. You're free to, but the law doesn't require you to. And with fixed term tenancy, and a lot of the landlords listening here who own student rentals will be really excited to find out that with fixed term tenancies, you will be able to give a unilateral notice to stop that tenancy from automatically rolling over into a periodic tenancy. So essentially you get parity of control as your tenant.
Yeah. So some people will be listening to that and going, the government, they're changing it, landlords, they're going to be kicking people out. It's terrible news, and some people are anxious about these things, especially if they're renters. Why is that a good thing? And why is it not such a bad thing for tenants?
Look, I think this is a typical case of the devil's always in the details, right?
Yep.
Because while social commentators are out there raging about, 90-day no-fault termination, tenants are going to lose their home tomorrow. No, they're not.
Yep.
Everyone calm down, because all of this is happening against the backdrop of broader protection for tenants vis-a-vis retaliatory termination under Section 54 of the Residential Tenancies Act. And essentially that is saying if you're at the receiving end of a 90-day no-fault termination, among other termination notices. But if you're at the receiving end of that termination notice and you believe that the landlord is at least in part motivated by a complaint you've made or you exercising your right against the landlord or a government agency like Tenancy Services exercising their oversight power against the landlord vis-a-vis this particular tenancy, then the Tenancy Tribunal is empowered by the amendments to not just set the termination notice aside, so you get to keep your home, but also order the landlord to pay you a penalty. Yeah. So ironically, and this is the thing, is a lot of the times I hear tenants talk about, we don't dare complain about our home or our landlord because we'll get kicked out. Yeah. But ironically, if you complain, in a way, you lock in your tenancy.
Yeah.
So complain away, guys.
Yeah.
Oh. And what are the rules at the moment? What are we changing from?
So what we're changing from is currently, if you are a landlord of a periodic tenancy, you have to give you want to terminate that tenancy. The law is saying to you, you can only terminate under these permissible circumstances. And it gets a little bit awkward because I think in New Zealand, we have to recognize that we're a common law jurisdiction. We're a country that believes in the freedom to contract, and having that limitation placed on you and being told that you can only get out of a tenancy that's no longer working for you for whatever reason, and you can only get out for these specific reasons, it gets really awkward. It gets people's back up. It gets people very anxious about becoming a landlord, and it's sort of perceived risk of owning a rental property just goes sky high. Whereas if you give them the opportunity to act rationally and reasonably as adults, they're just, hopefully they're going to behave themselves. And with these protection, with retaliatory termination, it's just got some good oversights and safeguards there for tenants.
Yeah. And I know there's going to be the comments going like, property investors are evil, you guys are cockroaches, all of that kind of stuff. Realistically, all a landlord wants, and yes, there are bad landlords, but there's bad people in all areas of life. That's not going to change. All landlords want are good tenants who pay the rent on time, look after the home, it's somewhat, relatively easy to deal with. And then if you've got some like ridiculous landlord, you probably want to get out of that situation if you're the tenant anyway. So like, this is all very common sense, right? Like being applied and just going like, it's your house. And if something's not working, you can do something about it, opposed to going through this process where like, who the hell knows what's going to happen?
Yeah, exactly. And I would say to that, what your comments about, landlords who are pragmatic and just want the rental property to work for them because you're economically rational people, is at the same time, we also need to recognize that tenants are in this rental situation for a home, right? So really what they're looking for is a healthy, safe place to bring up their families, put some roots down. They want a landlord or a property manager who is responsive to their requests because they're paying for a service. They're not just paying for the brick and mortar, they're paying for a service. So essentially, what we really need in terms of, our vision for a more well-functioning rental sector is very much everyone doing their part and acting reasonably.
Yeah. And you need property investors. You can't have like, you're taking away from first home buyers and all those sort of things. The government has no way to supply all of the housing stock available to tenants. You need good landlords. You need reasonable rules.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And I think, having been through the last government and sort of operating within the environment that's under the control of the current government, having seen the two different style of governance, what's really interesting to me there is, with the last government, there's very much this sense of landlords are the foe of society. They're the reason why we have a housing crisis. We need to stymie their efforts. We need to sort of curtail their wealth, their growth, all that sort of stuff. And it's a very sort of zero-sum approach to this big problem that we're all tackling as Kiwis. Whereas this current government is taking a very collegiate approach with landlords, and they're recognizing that the private sector is very much needed to provide solution and relief for the rental housing crisis. So I think it's you're just going to see different styles of government coming and going in New Zealand, and right now we're just operating, and thankfully operating within this environment where landlords and investors are very much recognized as part of the solution rather than the problem.
Yeah, and it was really interesting during that housing crisis, 2020, 21, 22, when it was, first of it was the foreign buyers, then we stopped that and that didn't do anything, and then it was the landlords and that didn't really do anything. And like it's a supply and demand and an affordability issue. You can paint whatever you want over the top of it. Fundamentally, it's the cost of living versus people's income, cost of houses versus people's income.
Yeah, I don't think it's sometimes with those things. I don't even think it's about like
it's not solving the problem.
It's not about like fixing the problem. It's like what narrative is going to be most believable to people.
Yeah.
Overseas buyers, property investors are evil.
Yeah.
A lot of people get behind those narratives.
Oh, well, it's us versus them, right?
Yeah. Sarina, what are some other changes outside of that 90-day change?
So one thing that's going to come in, we don't know when it is going to happen. The expected time is late this year or even early next year. One of the other big change that's coming with this act is pet rules. So, and I'm super excited about this because I'm a huge pet lover. Up until last year, I was a pet mom. And we are paving the ways. A lot of work is happening in the background, paving the ways for tenants to have a rebuttable, but it's a presumptive right for tenants to have pet at their rental property. And I think as an ex-renter and as a dog mom for over 15 years, it's just so exciting to me to see that there's finally a pathway in New Zealand that mirrors that of, say, Victoria in Australia, that gives tenants the ability to really enjoy their home to the full extent by having a pet if that's their choice.
Yeah. I mean, I if I was renting and I had my cat Beef Wellington, I know he'd be tearing the place bits to bits.
Yeah, I think property, like you go, I mean, a homeowner or a renter, they should have a right to have.
No one should be a second-class citizen in this sector.
I get that. I think property investors will go, oh no, these animals are going to trash my house. What would you say to that?
I would say, first thing, guys, tenants are not going to go out tomorrow in troves and all get a Rottweiler. They're finding it hard enough to pay rent every week already. So everyone just take a deep breath, okay? And I did emphasize the word rebuttable. So there is ample mechanism under the Act that allows the landlord to either set reasonable limits on the manner in which the tenant can have that pet at the rental property, or decline pet altogether. And it's really about acting reasonably, you know.
Bit of common sense.
Yeah, exactly.
If I've got 15 Rottweilers,
no.
Maybe you need to move somewhere else.
Yeah. What about this other change around notices by instant messaging app? Is this just getting with the times? Or?
No, it's super hip, isn't it? Super hip.
What is that?
It's open WhatsApp.
DMs?
I was amazed. I was overseas during the break and everything is done on WhatsApp, right? Like you make restaurant bookings on WhatsApp. You contact the hotel via WhatsApp. Yeah, super interesting. Yeah,
probably like pay people on WhatsApp. At some point, right?
Yeah.
I think, look, I would say definitely getting with the times, definitely making serving notices a little bit more accessible to people. I think if, you know, any of your listeners out there who are landlords or property managers, I think what you need to be really, really careful about is the app that you are going to choose using. Look, listen, I'm clearly of a certain vintage, so I don't talk social media like you boys do. But my understanding of apps like Snapchat is things disappear, right? So like do things disappear?
I just imagining you take a selfie and being like, here's your 90 days.
No, don't do that. Don't do that. You always need to think about the Herald front page test.
And don't do that. When you take that selfie, put on a goddamn shirt. Okay.
I've been on holiday for 4 weeks. There's no way I'm doing that.
I'm getting that tan out. Okay. Well, I mean, that's so that's just kind of like reflective of the times that
I think it's reflective of the time. I think there's going to be some fish hooks in there that the industry is going to have to flesh out and kind of work its head around, you know, what's the most sort of what's best practice,
what's reasonable.
And look, this is the thing about law is it's an iterative sport, right? So it's like we put something out there, see if it works, and if it doesn't, the industry will advocate and will just make changes happen.
Yeah, and I guess it's one of those things where, as like I sort of say, moving with the times. I get customers texting me all day long, right? You know, you just got to, and it's probably protects both parties in that instance, the landlord and the tenant.
Yeah. And look, honestly, like sometimes you're on the go. Like if I'm on the go, I don't want to be whipping open my email app.
No one answers a phone call anyway.
Dear James, you know, like I don't want to do that.
Yeah. All right. And so are there some changes to like bond rules aimed at pets? Is that right? Yes.
So as I suppose a form of quid pro quo for landlords to an extent have to accept pets at their rental property, the government is put in place a 2 weeks pet bond in addition to the maximum of 4 weeks general bond that you can take. And the reason, you know, just not many people know this, the reason why the pet rules are not happening right now as opposed to say the termination rules is because Tenancy Services is doing a huge project behind the scenes to update its bond software. So I think I heard that the bond software right now is called Bond 2000 or whatever, so to give you a sense of how old it is. So they sort of need, it's a huge technology transformation project, and they need to build in capability to accept pet bonds, documented all of that stuff, and that's the reason why the pet rules are not in place right now.
Before we move on, we talk all the time about planning and growing our wealth, but protecting that wealth is just as important. That's why having the right insurance in place can help when life goes unexpectedly.
And that's why this episode is brought to you by Partners Life, a New Zealand operated award-winning insurance provider with over 300,000 Kiwis insured and 89% of claims paid.
Partners Life understand that having some insurance is better than having no insurance. They have flexible and personalized solutions for any budget or situation.
Check out their website in our show notes below.
Sarina, I think one of the big things is when these changes happen, people get bits of information, right? And then some people can panic with this information. Some people could take a half truth or get a rumor and make this, I'm never going to be a property investor, or
Social
it's really
media.
unfair on
Meta
tenants.
just removed its moderators.
Yeah. What are the key things that landlords should know and be thinking about with these changes?
I think the key thing I would love landlords to know is devil's in the details. There's, Residential Tenancies Act in my time in the industry has gone from being a relatively simple piece of legislation to something that's hugely complex and just peppered with fish hooks. So I think now is the time for landlords and property managers and tenants as well to really take education very, very seriously. So many times we see people acting in their mind reasonably and rationally, but end up getting into huge trouble with the tenancy tribunal with thousands of dollars of fine because of these very nuanced and technical aspects of the laws. So I think education, taking it seriously is, please, rental property ownership is no longer a hobby sport. And as money guys, you know this, right? Like owning a rental is so complex, not just tenancy laws, financing rules, tax rules, everything. So get well advised. I think it's also really, really important. I mentioned before that it's an iterative sport, especially in when it comes to pets. It's so new in New Zealand. We just need to let the law bed in and see how it works. And if it doesn't work, we need grassroots organizations like the Auckland Property Investors Association or the Real Estate Institute of New Zealand to really come up and advocate for the industry and let government know, hey, with all the best intentions you had, unfortunately, it's just not landed super well, but here are some suggestions. And organizations like ours just really need to rely on landlords up and down the country, property managers up and down the country to really invest in that collective advocacy effort.
So talk to me about the Property Investors Association. What's the mission? What are you trying to do? And quite often people, some people we listen to this going, the government just put rules in place and then that's it. It never changes. And we saw a bit of that with the triple CFA regulation that came in, and actually. They took feedback and rolled some of it back. So talk to me about, the Investors Association.
So the Investors Association is really created to help Kiwis make better decisions with the property investment. And it's kind of coming from the recognition that in a low wage and high living cost economy, many of us achieve financial security with property. So if people are doing it anyway, if people are economically rationally doing it anyway, we need an avenue to support their efforts, to educate them, to advocate for them, to provide a sense of community, to help them build connections. So those are education, community, and advocacy are our three main goals. And a lot of our effort is spent on putting on webinars and seminars to update investors on the latest tax rules, the triple CFA. And, we're so pleased last year to say to our members, you know what? Go to your KFC. Keep your Netflix. You're fine.
My KFC was top of the list.
But and another big thing that we're super passionate about is representing landlords and property managers to government, to policy advisors, and helping them craft what you see is in the laws today. And we look to organizations like the Property Council that does it in like such a supernomic way that's so effective, and we'll really look up to them and try to emulate what they're doing for commercial property developers in a sort of residential setting.
Cool. Awesome. When you're talking about those changes before and you're talking about the fish hooks, immediately I start to think, why the hell would anybody manage their own property? Just get a property manager.
I think the same.
Don't.
Don't, guys, unless you can do it to the standard of a very good property manager don't.
And what do you think about, so I have ranted for half an hour before about how much I dislike property managers because I feel like it's just like a volume game. You need for the business model to work. Are there good property managers?
So many, but so many bad ones. Yeah. And it's a huge problem in the industry that the property managers are not regulated at all and that they report to nobody.
Yeah.
And, if you think they transact tens and thousands of hundreds and thousands of dollars each week, and they're in charge of millions of dollars worth of assets. It's incredible to me that there's no governing body that sets minimum standards, that sets continuing education standards, that has a disciplinary process. I wrote an email to the minister out of sheer frustration, and it was really, really good to see that even while he was at the Paris Olympics, he replied to me straight away. And I basically just wrote to him and just say, Minister, I gotta be honest with you, up until that point in 24, most of the inquiries we got at APIA from the Auckland Property Investors Association from our members is to do with property managers, is to do with problems within the management contract. It's not to do with your tenants.
Yeah. We get our fair share of those stories as well. But when we think about that, I go, it's not often you hear someone go, man, I've got a great property manager.
I mean,
call me, guys.
Right.
I know a few.
Yeah. I mean, if you want to give some a shout out,
it's just one of those things where if you've got a great property manager, you probably don't think about it. You know what I mean? It's only when you have a bad experience that you talk about it, and that's the kind of thing. So I'm sure there are great ones out there.
Yeah. So Sarina, I mean, we look at all of these changes that you've talked us through. Then you think back about interest deductibility. I mean, there's a lot happening, right? This is pretty significant stuff that property investors need to be familiar with.
Yes, definitely. And I think if anything, if the last few years had taught us anything, it's really it's increasingly important for property investors to not operate in silo and really take advice, really work with, fantastic organizations like Lighthouse, training facilities to keep updated. Look, it's not something that you need to go back to school for. You don't need to invest 20 hours a week on it, but you do need to turn your mind to it. And it's like I said before, it's no longer a hobby sport.
Yeah.
You gotta take it seriously.
And if you were to be given the magic wand, your Harry Potter for the day, and you go, well, these changes have been done, but I want to Expelliarmus some other changes, what would be next on your hit list? What would you want to see changed?
The next on my hit list, I tell you what, I'm so mindful of what is happening with Meta because of all the publicity about it this week and last week.
Yeah.
The change I really want to see in New Zealand is better control around content and information sharing online. There are so many of us now are locked in our bedroom, just on the phone every day. People, it scares the bejesus out of me to see people go on Facebook, whatever social media is of the day, X, Blue Sky, to seek financial advice, to seek legal advice.
Yeah.
And isn't it incredible that a lot of these posters who give answers and are considered online gurus, they always post during business hours?
Yeah.
And you're like, shouldn't you be working?
Yeah.
Just for the record, Em does the posting during business hours.
We are not
giving
doing
the financial
the
advice.
Yeah, but if you have and we all, I mean, not naming names because I don't want to get you guys in trouble, but we all know who they are. You have like an accountant who's on Facebook every day going, oh, you need to structure your thing this way tax rate. I'm like, do you actually have clients?
Yeah, I find that really interesting because we the tricky thing is often that content performs really well, whereas we're quite hamstrung as to what we can say online because we know we don't know the full situation, so we'd never give the advice.
Yeah. So look, going back to your question, James, if
I'd love to be able to do it.
Magic
imagine
wand?
us just shooting from the hip and giving advice all the time.
Well, just have everyone be better behaved and more transparent, and online.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree. But if you did find us through Facebook or YouTube, make sure to give us a follow and a like, because you can trust us.
Yeah.
What about when it comes to, obviously a lot's happened in the past couple of years. Property prices have fallen off a cliff. Interest rates have been really high. There's these changes happening. You've got 1,000 members at your association. What's the mindset at the moment? How are they feeling?
How are they feeling? Bit different, or when I think about it, when I reflect on how our members are feeling, I really can see two very different types of personalities emerging. So we see the people who are very fatalistic, and they just think, everything's going down in the dumps and it's all going on fire and it's terrible, and oh my God, this government isn't doing enough for us, and Labour's going to win, and then you see people who sort of go, oh hey, there are all these investors who are no longer passionate about investing. I can probably come in and scoop up a good deal and provide some really great solutions, and I can maybe talk to my developer and talk about how do I put a minor dwelling onto the, really maximize the potential of my rental property. So we see people who are fatalistic, people who are super opportunistic, and it's really interesting in property investor associations up and down the country is because we're communities, we're local grassroots communities. You see at every event, you just really see that tension play out, and someone would stand up and go, oh God, it's so bad, and then someone else would sit there quietly going, I'm going to call that guy and see who's going to sell me.
How bad is it?
I'll take the problem off your hands.
Yeah. We might try that a couple of times.
Yeah, maybe we have.
Okay, cool. Anything else, Sarina, you want to touch on? You also mentioned that you wanted to talk to our listeners about maybe a special offer.
Oh, yes. Thank you. So look, we love you guys. We love what you're doing. And we would very much, we're all about education just like you. So we'd very much like to invite all of your listeners, all of your clients, if they would like to join our association. We'll offer a 1 month free membership on us.
Cool.
And you can just come check it out. Dip your toes in the water, see if you meet someone you like.
Say that you saw it here on Checks and Balances and get that first month free.
Yeah, and I'll pop a discount code through. Do you guys have show notes? Can I?
Yep.
Yeah, we've got show notes.
Yeah.
Pop a
Do
discount
Mike and
code
I understand
through
how that works? No, and we'll sort it out. It'll be somewhere down there.
You know what? I'm going to put the code as Mike and James.
How good. All right. Well, that's so a lot of changes out there. Make sure to take those down. It's important to understand these things. Sarina, thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Much love to Partners Life for sponsoring this episode. Make sure to subscribe to the channel. Make sure to give us a review because we love the reviews, and give us a like, and we'll catch you next time.